January 29, 2025. This date is now etched into the history of aviation as the day a historic era of safety came to a violent end. For 16 years, the United States had achieved what was once thought impossible: a complete absence of fatal crashes involving major commercial passenger airlines. But that streak ended in the darkness over the nation's capital. At 8:47 p.m., in the freezing air above the Potomac River, the inherent complexities of America's most restricted airspace manifested in a catastrophic collision. It was a disaster involving a regional jet carrying elite athletes and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter on a training mission. They were separated by feet, seconds, and a single fatal flaw in the communication infrastructure. This wasn't just an accident. It was a perfect storm of operational vulnerabilities that had been hiding in plain sight for over a decade. Tonight, we analyze the NTSB Docket DCA25MA108. We will reconstruct the timeline, examine the treacherous visual environment of Washington, D.C., and reveal how a split-second overlap on the radio frequency cost 67 lives. To understand the tragedy, we must first understand who was on board. American Airlines Flight 53042, operated by PSA Airlines, was a Bombardier CRJ700 returning from Wichita, Kansas. The passenger manifest read like a who's who of the future of American sport. A delegation of elite figure skaters, their dedicated mothers, and renowned coaches, including Russian legends Evgenia Shishkova and Vadim Naumov, were on board. They were returning from the national championships. The mood in the cabin was one of exhaustion and celebration. They were on the final leg of their journey home. Flying the jet was a veteran captain with nearly 4,000 flight hours. They were operating in a high-pressure environment, but one they were well qualified to handle. Simultaneously, just a few miles south at Davison Army Airfield, a different crew was preparing for takeoff. This was Priority Air Transport 25, a Sikorsky UH-60L Blackhawk. These soldiers belonged to the 12th Aviation Battalion, known as the Gold Top Unit, the elite crews trusted to transport top Pentagon generals and dignitaries. On this night, however, they were flying a standard training profile. The crew of 3, Captain Rebecca Lobach, Chief Warrant Officer Andrew Eves, and Staff Sergeant Ryan O'Hara, were practicing navigation within the highly restricted Special Flight Rules area. Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, or DCA, is notorious among pilots. It is a high-density airport squeezed between a major city and a river, protected by prohibited airspace over the National Mall. At 8:39 p.m., Flight 53042 was cleared for the Mount Vernon visual approach. This procedure requires pilots to fly north, following the curves of the Potomac River to avoid the White House and Pentagon airspace. Normally, they would land straight ahead on runway 1. However, the tower was busy. To keep traffic moving, controllers offered the crew a circle-to-land maneuver for runway 33. This is a demanding request. Runway 33 is significantly shorter than the main runway and intersects it. To land there, a pilot must fly towards the airport, then visually break off, banking hard over the dark river to line up with a different strip of concrete. It requires strict manual flying and intense focus outside the cockpit window. While the jet prepared for this tight maneuver, the Army Black Hawk was entering the same theater. The helicopter requested to transit via Helicopter Route 1 to Route 4. Here lies the critical design flaw of this airspace. Helicopter Route 4 acts as a tunnel. It runs directly along the river, physically underneath the airspace used by jets maneuvering for runway 33. The helicopters are at 300 feet. The jets descend through 400 and 300 feet in the exact same lateral space. There was another invisible danger that night: frequency segregation. To prevent radio congestion, the air traffic control tower splits its frequencies. The commercial jet was talking to the tower on 119.1 MHz. The military helicopter was talking to the helicopter controller on 134.35 MHz. This meant the pilots were operating in situational awareness silos. The airline pilots could not hear the helicopter reporting its position. The Army crew could not hear the clearance given to the jet. They were flying blind to each other's intentions, relying entirely on the controller to bridge the gap. As the jet began its low-altitude turn and the helicopter tracked south along the river, the visual environment began to work against them. The weather was clear, but the visual noise of DC is blinding. For the jet crew looking down, the dark helicopter was camouflaged against the black water. For the helicopter crew looking up, the jet's lights blended perfectly with the city streetlights and the bright approach lights of the airport. We now move to the critical seconds documented by the flight data recorders. At 8 hours 46 minutes and 1 second p.m., the tower controller on the helicopter frequency spots the conflict. He calls the Black Hawk. Traffic just south of the Wilson Bridge, CRJ, at 1200 circling to runway 33. The helicopter pilot replies, "Traffic in sight." Hearing this, the controller grants visual separation. In aviation law, this is a massive shift in responsibility. The controller is no longer responsible for keeping them apart, the pilot is. But at night, judging the closure rate of a descending jet head-on is nearly impossible due to the loom effect. The aircraft appears stationary until it suddenly expands in the windshield. At 8 hours 47 minutes and 39 seconds, an alarm screams in the control tower. The geometry is tightening. The jet is banking. The helicopter is holding its line. The controller realizes the visual separation has failed. He keys his microphone urgently. "PAT-25, pass behind that CRJ." It was the instruction that would have saved them. But at that exact millisecond, precisely as the controller said "pass behind," the helicopter pilot keyed their microphone to make a routine report. This is known as a step-on. For 0.8 seconds, the frequencies overlapped. The helicopter crew did not hear the command to evade. They heard only a fragment. "Pat, CRJ." Interpreting this as a routine update, the pilot responded, "PAT-25 has aircraft in sight." 14 seconds later, the margin for error ran out. At 8 hours 47 minutes and 59 seconds, at an altitude of just 300 feet, the right wing of the CRJ700 impacted the main rotor system of the Black Hawk. The physics of the collision were violent and immediate. The helicopter disintegrated instantly due to the high rotational energy of the blades. The jet, having lost a significant portion of its lift and control surfaces, rolled uncontrollably. Both aircraft plummeted into the freezing waters of the Potomac River, less than a mile from the runway threshold. The response was massive. Coast Guard cutters, police harbor patrols, and fire units rushed to the scene. But the water temperature was near freezing. The survival window was measured in minutes. By the early hours of the morning, the rescue mission became a recovery operation. All 67 souls, 60 passengers, 4 airline crew, and 3 Army aviators were lost. The National Transportation Safety Board investigation, led by Chair Jennifer Homendy, uncovered a chilling fact. This had happened before. In 2013, a nearly identical near-miss event occurred at DCA involving a regional jet and a military helicopter. The data showed that TCAS, the collision avoidance system on the jet, was useless in this scenario. Because they were so close to the ground, the computer is programmed to inhibit descent commands to prevent driving the plane into the terrain. The NTSB concluded that while the pilots and controllers followed the rules themselves were broken. The reliance on see and avoid in a complex, visually noisy night environment was a fatal systemic failure. The airspace design allowed high-speed jets and low-altitude helicopters to occupy the same space without a unified radio frequency. The legacy of American Airlines Flight 534-2 is a fundamental restructuring of the Washington D.C. airspace. Before the final report was even published, the FAA issued urgent orders. Simultaneous circling approaches and river helicopter traffic are now prohibited. A unified frequency is now mandated for all traffic in the river corridor, restoring the party line situational awareness that could have prevented this tragedy. The crash ended a golden age of aviation safety, but it forced the industry to confront the dangers of complacency. We learned that even with the best technology, the best pilots, and the best controllers, a system with latent design flaws will eventually fail. For the families of the skaters, the coaches, and the soldiers, the findings offer the only possible solace, a guarantee that the skies over the Capitol are finally truly safe for those who follow.